Have you ever had a moment where the floor just falls out from under you? 1 second you're standing on what you think is solid ground, and the next you're in a free fall with nothing to grab onto. For Clara, that moment didn't happen on a cliff edge or during a terrifying accident. It happened under the fluorescent lights of a doctor's office in front of a receptionist with pity in her eyes. It happened with the single soul-crushing phrase, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined." A simple inconvenience for most, but for her, it was the declaration of a war she didn't even know had been waged, and the man who had just fired the first shot, her husband. The air in the penthouse was always the same, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, and scented with a custom blend of white tea and fig that cost more per ounce than most people's groceries. It was the smell of wealth of curated perfection. From their 72nd floor perch, overlooking Central Park, New York City, was a silent, sparkling tapestry. A kingdom that Clara Becker Worthington was supposed to feel like a queen of. Instead, most days, she felt like its most well-kept prisoner. Her husband, Richard Worthington, CEO of the tech behemoth Nexus Dynamics, was a man who didn't just live his life, he architected it. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the thread count of their sheets to the exact shade of cream on the walls, a color he dubbed Monet's morning light. Their marriage was his masterpiece. On the surface, it was flawless. They were the golden couple of the New York tech and society scene. Richard, with his sharp Tom Ford suits, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could disarm senators and secure billion-dollar deals, and Clara, the elegant, supportive wife, always dressed in the latest Oscar de la Renta or Carolina Herrera, her art history degree from Yale. A charming footnote to her primary role as Mrs. Worthington. Their photos were splashed across Vogue and Vanity Fair, pages laughing at the Met Gala, looking serious and philanthropic at the Worthington Foundation Gala, sailing off the coast of St. Bart's. Richard loved the image they projected. Power, stability, old money meets new tech. He often said, "Perception is reality, Clara. We give them the reality they want to see." But the reality Clara lived was one of quiet erosions, a slow, steady chipping away at her own identity, until she was little more than a beautiful, breathing accessory. It hadn't started that way. When she'd met Richard, she was a promising curator at a small but respected Chelsea gallery. She had a sharp eye, a passion for discovering new artists, and a life that was her own. Richard had been a whirlwind, a force of nature who saw her he'd claimed like no one else had. He'd loved her fire, her independence. He'd supported her work, attending her gallery openings and buying pieces from her featured artists. But after the wedding, the support slowly morphed into control, all under the guise of love and protection. "Darling, why stress yourself with the gallery? You don't need to work," he'd murmured one night, massaging her shoulders as she pored over invoices. "Let me take care of you. I want to give you the world." The world, it turned out, meant giving up her job. Then it meant letting his financial team handle her trivial finances. "It's just more efficient, sweetheart. Everything in one place. No need for you to worry your pretty head about it." She was given a credit card, an exclusive black steel card linked to his primary account. At first, it felt like freedom. Unlimited funds. No need to check a balance. But she soon learned it was a leash. Every purchase, from a coffee to a couture gown, was logged and itemized in a monthly report that his personal assistant reviewed. More than once, Richard had casually brought up a purchase in conversation, Did you enjoy that lunch at Perse with Isabella? The truffle risotto must have been divine, judging by the bill. The message was clear. I am always watching. Her friends had dwindled, not because he forbade her from seeing them, but because he made it subtly difficult. Her old art world friends were a bit scruffy for their new social circle. Her college friends were provincial. Her best friend, Isabella Rossi, a razor-sharp corporate lawyer, was the only one who saw through the facade. He's building a cage, Clara Isabella had warned her over lunch a year ago, her voice low. It's a beautiful gilded cage, but it's still a cage. Do you even have your own bank account anymore? Clara had flushed with defensiveness. Richard takes care of everything. It's easier that way. Isabella had just shaken her head, her dark eyes filled with concern. It's never easier to give up your power, honey. It's just easier for him. Now Clara was living the truth of Isabella's words. The silence in their marriage had grown cavernous. Richard was consumed with the launch of Nexus Dynamics' new flagship product, Aura, a revolutionary AI-driven home integration system. He spent weeks in Palo Alto, leaving Clara alone in the silent fig-scented penthouse. The loneliness was a physical ache, a hollowness that no amount of shopping or charity work could fill, which brought her to today. The appointment. The topic of children had been a delicate, painful dance for the past 3 years. Richard wanted an heir, a successor to the Worthington Empire. It was the one piece of his architected life that was missing. He spoke of their future son. It was always a son, as if he were a foregone conclusion. But nature had not complied with Richard Worthington's 5-year plan. After a year of trying with no success, Richard had decreed they would see the best fertility specialist in the country, Dr. Lena Hansen. It was Clara who had to endure the endless tests, the hormonal injections, the invasive procedures. Richard was too busy, too important. He'd provided his sample with the detached efficiency of a man making a deposit at a bank and considered his part done. The pressure, the stress, the blame, all of it, landed squarely on Clara's shoulders. This morning's appointment was a follow-up to her latest round of tests. The air between them at breakfast had been thick with unspoken resentment. Richard had been scrolling through his tablet, his brow furrowed as he read the pre-market reports from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. "Do you have to go today?" he'd asked, not looking up. "I have back-to-back calls with the board. The Aura launch is critical." "Yes, Richard. It's the follow-up with Dr. Hansen. We discussed this," Clara said, her voice tighter than she intended. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes as cold and remote as a winter sky. "Just have her assistant send me the report. I'll have my team review it." My team. The word stung. This wasn't a business acquisition. It was their life. It was her body. "I think you should be there, and I think you're being overly emotional." He'd snapped, folding his napkin and placing it on the table. A signal that the conversation was over. "I'm building an empire, Clara. For us, for our future family. All I ask is a little support and a little less drama." He'd stood up, leaned down to kiss the air beside her cheek, and walked out without another word. The scent of his expensive cologne, a mix of sandalwood and entitlement, lingered long after he was gone. Now sitting in the back of the chauffeured Maybach as it purred through Manhattan traffic, Clara felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The car was another of Richard's gifts. She hadn't driven herself in years. He'd insisted on a driver for safety and convenience. She knew it was for control. She couldn't just go wherever she wanted. Every trip was logged, every destination known. She clutched her Hermes clutch, the smooth leather, doing little to soothe her frayed nerves. Inside was the black card, her lifeline, her leash. The appointment with Dr. Hansen wasn't just about fertility anymore. It was about her health. The stress of her life with Richard was taking a physical toll. She'd been having dizzy spells and heart palpitations. She hadn't told Richard. He would have dismissed it as more of her drama. The Maybach pulled up to the curb in front of a discreet, elegant brownstone on the Upper East Side that housed Dr. Hansen's private practice. "I will be back in 1 hour, Robert," she told the driver, trying to sound confident. "Yes, Mrs. Worthington." As she walked toward the heavy oak doors, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She was walking into a consultation about creating a new life, but she felt as if her own was slipping away, bit by bit, purchase by purchase, dismissal by dismissal. She was living in a gilded cage, and she was beginning to fear the doors had been locked for good. Dr. Hansen's office was the antithesis of Clara's penthouse. It was warm and inviting with soft lighting, plush armchairs, and walls adorned with vibrant, hopeful art pieces Clara recognized from up-and-coming artists she would have once championed. Dr. Hansen herself was a woman in her late 50s with kind, intelligent eyes and a calming presence. She didn't treat Clara like the wife of a billionaire. She treated her like a person. "Clara." "It's good to see you," she said, gesturing for her to sit. "Though I wish Richard could have joined us. The new product launch is all-consuming," Clara replied, the excuse tasting like ash in her mouth. Dr. Hansen gave a knowing, gentle nod. "Of course. Well, let's go over your results." She pulled up a file on her computer screen, her expression turning serious. "Physically, you are in perfect health. All your levels are normal. But I want to talk about something else. Your cortisol levels." She turned the screen toward Clara. It was a chart with a jagged red line that was alarmingly high. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. In a healthy person, it fluctuates. Yours are chronically elevated. This is the kind of level I see in first responders or people in active combat zones. "Clara, what's going on in your life?" The question was so direct, so compassionate, that it shattered Clara's carefully constructed composure. The tears she had been holding back for months, for years, began to well up. I don't know," she stammered, hating the weakness in her voice. "Everything is supposed to be perfect." "Supposed to be?" Dr. Hansen probed gently. Chronic stress can have a significant impact on fertility. It can disrupt hormone regulation and create an environment that is inhospitable to conception. Forget the injections and the procedures for a moment. I'm more concerned about you, Clara. Your well-being. This level of stress is not sustainable. It's a tremendous burden on your heart, your immune system, on your entire body. They talked for nearly an hour. For the first time, Clara spoke honestly about the crushing loneliness, the constant feeling of being watched and managed, the subtle ways Richard made her feel small and inconsequential. She didn't paint him as a monster, but as a man so obsessed with control that he was suffocating her. Dr. Hansen listened without judgment, offering not platitudes but real medical concern. "Clara," she said finally, her tone firm but kind, "we can continue with the treatments, but I strongly advise you to seek therapy for yourself. You need an outlet. You need to address this stress at its source. A baby isn't a solution to an unhappy environment. It's a life that deserves to enter a peaceful one." Walking out of the consultation room, Clara felt strangely lighter, as if a great pressure had been momentarily lifted. Someone saw her. Someone understood. The validation was a balm on her raw nerves. She felt a flicker of her old self, the competent, confident woman who could handle anything. She approached the polished mahogany reception desk. A pleasant young woman smiled at her. "That will be $5,200 for today's consultation and lab work, Mrs. Worthington. A routine transaction." Clara opened her clutch, pulled out the heavy black steel card, and handed it over. She'd used it for purchases 10 times that amount, without a second thought. The receptionist swiped it. A soft beep. She frowned and swiped it again. Another beep. A flush began to creep up Clara's neck. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said, her professional smile faltering. "It's not going through. Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible," Clara said, her voice a little too loud. "Try it again. The chip, maybe." The woman tried the chip. The small screen on the terminal flashed red. Card declined. Contact issuer. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Clara's brief moment of clarity. This had never happened before. Never. There must be some mistake, she insisted, her heart starting to pound against her ribs in a frantic rhythm. It's an unlimited card. The receptionist's eyes were wide with a mixture of confusion and pity, the exact look Clara dreaded most. A woman in a Chanel suit in the waiting area glanced over, her curiosity piqued. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over Clara's face. "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Worthington," the receptionist whispered, leaning forward. "It says the account holder has suspended the card." The account holder. Richard. The world tilted on its axis. He'd done this. He had deliberately, coldly cut her off. On the day of her fertility appointment. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. A punishment for the argument that morning, for daring to ask for his presence, for being an emotional inconvenience while he was building his empire. Her hands trembled as she fumbled in her clutch for her phone. She didn't have another card. She didn't have cash. Richard had called carrying large amounts of cash. Vulgar. The black card was all she had. It was all he allowed her to have. She found his name in her contacts and pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, a third time. She could picture him in his glass-walled office, seeing her name on his screen and deliberately ignoring it. Finally, he picked up. "Clara, I'm in a meeting." His voice was clipped impatient. "Richard, my card was declined," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Here at Dr. Hansen's. They said you suspended it." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't a silence of confusion. It was a silence of confirmation. It was the silence of power. "Did I?" he said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of warmth. "Strange. Perhaps you should be more careful with your spending, Clara. Things are tight with the Aura launch. Every penny counts." It was the most ludicrous lie she had ever heard. Nexus Dynamics was worth over $500 billion. Tight was not a word in Richard Worthington's vocabulary. This was purely sadistically about putting her in her place. "Richard, please," she begged, the word tasting like poison. "I'm at the reception desk. This is humiliating." "Well," he said, and she could almost hear the cruel smirk in his voice. "Perhaps it's a valuable lesson in fiscal responsibility. I have to go. We'll discuss it when I get back from Palo Alto." The line went dead. She stood there, phone in her hand, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. The receptionist was looking at her, her face a mask of professional sympathy. The woman in the Chanel suit was now openly staring. Clara felt naked, exposed, stripped bare in the most brutal way imaginable. He hadn't just blocked a card. He had announced to the world, or at least this small, exclusive corner of it, that she was nothing. She had no money, no power, no agency of her own. She was entirely dependent on his whim, and he had just shown her how easily he could turn it off. Just as the full, crushing weight of it was about to bring her to her knees, Dr. Hansen emerged from her office, having heard the commotion. She took in the scene in an instant, Clara's white face, the receptionist's distress. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her calm voice cutting through the tension. Her card was declined," the receptionist stammered. Clara wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But Dr. Hansen simply walked to the desk, put a reassuring hand on Clara's arm, and spoke to the receptionist. "It's fine, Sarah. Send the invoice to my personal accounting. We'll sort it out later." She then turned to Clara, her eyes full of a deep, sorrowful understanding. "Clara, let me call you a cab." "My driver," Clara started to say, then stopped. The driver worked for Richard. Taking the Maybach would be another form of capitulation, another acceptance of his control. "No," Clara said, a new, unfamiliar strength hardening her voice. "A cab would be wonderful, thank you." The ride home in a rattling yellow taxi, a vehicle she hadn't been in for a decade, was a study in contrasts. Outside, the city bustled with life, people hurrying along the sidewalks, living their own independent lives. Inside, Clara felt like a ghost. The humiliation at the clinic had burned away the last vestiges of her denial. This wasn't a partnership. It was a dictatorship. The gilded cage was real, and the door had just been slammed shut and locked. But as the taxi crossed 59th Street, something else began to burn alongside the shame rage. A cold, clear, incandescent rage. Richard wanted to teach her a lesson. Fine. She was about to teach him one, too. When Clara walked into the silent, scent-controlled penthouse, it felt alien, like a museum of a life that was no longer hers. The floor-to-ceiling windows that once seemed to offer a view of the world now felt like the glass walls of a fishbowl. She walked past the abstract paintings Richard had chosen, the sterile designer furniture, and the framed photos of their perfect life. In every photo she was smiling, but now all she could see was the hostage-like quality in her eyes. She didn't cry. The tears had been cauterized by the white-hot fury that was now coursing through her veins. He thought he could humiliate her, strip her of her dignity, and leave her powerless. He thought she would just sit here in their perfect prison, waiting for him to return from Palo Alto and benevolently restore her privileges. He had fundamentally misunderstood the woman he had married, the woman he had tried so hard to erase. He had forgotten she had a voice. Her first and only call was to Isabella. "Izzy," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Can you come over? Something's happened." Isabella, who could read Clara's moods better than anyone, detected the steel beneath the quiet. "On my way. Don't do anything until I get there." An hour later, Isabella blew into the penthouse like a hurricane of righteous indignation. She wore a sharp black power suit and an expression that could curdle milk. She'd already cancelled 3 client meetings. Clara recounted the entire day, from the conversation with Dr. Hansen about her stress levels to the final brutal phone call with Richard. She spoke without emotion, her voice flat and precise, laying out the facts as if she were a witness describing a crime. Which in a way she was. When she finished, Isabella was silent for a full minute, her jaw tight. That sociopathic son of a bitch. She finally breathed, her voice low and dangerous. This isn't just cruel, Clara. This is calculated. This is coercive control. It's a classic textbook tactic of abuse. He's isolating you, controlling your access to resources. He did this to break you. I know, Clara said simply. Okay. Isabella went into lawyer mode, pacing the vast living room. Okay, we have options. We file for divorce. We get a forensic accountant to go through his finances. We can prove financial abuse. It will be messy, it will be public, and he will fight dirty. He'll use his PR machine to paint you as an unstable gold-digging shrew. Clara shook her head. He controls the narrative, Izzy. He always has. His team will leak stories. They'll twist everything. I'll be the crazy wife of the beloved tech genius. No one will believe me. So what do we do? Isabella asked, stopping in front of her. What do you want to do? Clara looked up, and for the first time that day, Isabella saw a fire in her eyes she hadn't seen since before Richard. It was the look of the old Clara, the gallery curator, who could spot a masterpiece in a dusty pile of canvases. I want to tell the truth, Clara said. But I want to tell it my way, before he can twist it, before his PR team can spin it. I want to burn his narrative to the ground. A slow smile spread across Isabella's face. You want to get ahead of him. You want to set the battlefield. I want to blow it up, Clara corrected. He built his entire empire on a carefully crafted image of benevolence and integrity. A family man, a visionary. His company Nexus Dynamics sells Aura, a system that's all about trust and integration into the home. What happens when the world finds out that the man selling them a key to their perfect home uses his own to lock his wife in a cage? Isabella's smile widened. Oh, this is good. This is very, very good. So how do we do it? A tell-all with the New York Times? No, Clara said immediately. They'll filter it, edit it, frame it their way. This needs to be my voice. Unfiltered, unedited, raw. She walked over to her laptop, a sleek device Richard had bought her. She opened it, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I used to have a blog, years ago, before Richard. It was called The Gilded Frame. I wrote about art life, finding beauty in unexpected places. I haven't touched it in years, but I still own the domain. Clara, are you sure? Isabella asked, her voice turning serious. Once you do this, there's no going back. You will detonate a bomb in the middle of your life. And his. My life was detonated this morning at a reception desk on the Upper East Side. Clara said, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. This is just me picking up the trigger. For the next 4 hours, the penthouse became a war room. Isabella ordered Thai food, while Clara wrote. The words poured out of her a torrent of truth that had been dammed up for a decade. She wrote with a precision and eloquence that came from years of suppressed intelligence. She didn't rant. She didn't sling mud. She simply told her story. She started with the scene at the doctor's office, describing the clinical details, the receptionist's pity, the cold finality of the words, card suspended. She named the clinic, she named the doctor, not to implicate them, but to ground the story in undeniable fact. Then she pulled back the curtain on their marriage. She wrote about giving up her career, about the slow, insidious transfer of her financial independence. She detailed the casual remarks about her spending the way he used the black card as both a reward and a leash. She wrote about the loneliness, the isolation, the constant pressure to be perfect. She wrote about the fertility treatments, her body being poked and prodded for an heir to an empire she had no stake in. She was careful and deliberate. She used his own language, his corporate speak, against him. She called his actions a hostile takeover of her life. She referred to his control as a feature, not a bug, of their marriage. She was leveraging his own brand against him. Isabella, reading over her shoulder, acted as a legal and strategic editor. Good use, that phrase, coercive control. It has a legal weight, she'd say. Or, don't just say he was dismissive, give the exact quote. A little less drama, Clara. Perfect. It makes him sound like a condescending prick. The final piece was a masterstroke of narrative warfare. Clara titled it simply, "My husband is Richard Worthington. Yesterday, he blocked my card at my fertility appointment." The title was a heat-seeking missile aimed directly at the heart of his public image. It was specific, shocking, and impossible to ignore. As she attached a photo to the post, not one of the glossy Vanity Fair shots, but a candid photo a friend had taken years ago of her in her old gallery, laughing, her face vibrant and full of life, a stark contrast to the hollowed-out socialite she had become. A wave of fear washed over her. This was it, the point of no return. "Are you ready?" Isabella asked softly, her hand on Clara's shoulder. Clara took a deep, shuddering breath. She thought of the woman in the Chanel suit. She thought of Dr. Hansen's kind eyes. She thought of Richard's cold, smug voice on the phone. She thought of the life she had lost and the woman she had almost forgotten. "Yes," she said. Her finger hovered over the mouse. She looked at Isabella, who gave her a firm, determined nod. Click. The post was live. For a moment, there was only silence in the vast, empty penthouse. Then Isabella's phone buzzed, and again, and again. She had shared the link on her private social media. Clara closed the laptop. She didn't want to watch the numbers, the shares, the comments. Not yet. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights. They didn't look like a sparkling tapestry anymore. They looked like a million possibilities, a million different lives. For the first time in a decade, she felt like one of them could be hers. The cage door was open. She had just set fire to the cage itself. The internet does not sleep, and it does not forgive. Clara's post didn't just make a splash. It was a digital tsunami. It started as these things do, in small, concentrated ripples. Isabella's network of powerful female lawyers and executives in New York saw it first. They were women who understood the subtleties of power misogyny and the gilded cages that still existed even in the 21st century. They shared it with fury, adding their own commentary. This is what coercive control looks like. I've seen this happen to friends. Bravo for her courage. Within an hour, the ripples hit the tech world. A journalist from TechCrunch, known for her sharp critiques of Silicon Valley's toxic bro culture, posted the link on X, formerly Twitter. Her post went viral. The carefully curated image of Nexus Dynamics CEO Richard Worthington is taking a major hit tonight. And it's coming from inside the house. By midnight, Clara's story was the #1 trending topic in the United States. Stand with Clara was born, and it was a wildfire. Clara and Isabella watched, huddled on the white sofa that Richard had picked out, a laptop open between them. They were no longer in the penthouse. They were in the eye of a hurricane they had summoned. Clara's blog. A dormant site that had previously received maybe a dozen hits a month had crashed twice from the traffic. Isabella had to call a web developer friend in a panic to get it moved to a dedicated server. The comments section was a deluge of human emotion. Thousands of women shared their own stories of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and losing themselves in a relationship. "Thank you for giving this a name," one wrote. "My ex did this to me for years, but I just thought he was bad with money. He was controlling me." Another said, "I'm a stay-at-home mum. This is my biggest fear. You've inspired me to open my own bank account tomorrow." Of course there was vitriol. Anonymous accounts, likely Richard's sycophants or paid trolls, flooded the comments with accusations. She was a gold digger, a liar, an opportunist trying to extort a rich man. But for every hateful comment, there were 100 messages of support, drowning out the noise with a powerful chorus of solidarity. The mainstream media caught on with a speed that was dizzying. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Forbes, every major outlet was reporting on it. They couldn't just ignore it. Clara had been too smart. She hadn't made vague accusations. She had provided specific, verifiable details: the doctor's appointment, the public humiliation, the direct quotes. Her story was layered with the kind of authentic detail that is difficult to fabricate and easy to believe. The photo she'd chosen was a stroke of genius. Juxtaposed against the story of a broken, controlled woman were the images the media outlets pulled from Getty Images: Clara and Richard at Gala's hymn, with his arm possessively around her. Her with a smile that now looked strained and hollow. The contrast was devastating. Somewhere over the Pacific, on a private jet flying back from Asia, Richard Worthington was in the middle of a celebratory champagne toast with his executive team. The Aura pre-launch in Tokyo had been a staggering success. He was on top of the world. When the jet's Wi-Fi connected as they approached US airspace, his phone exploded. It wasn't with messages of congratulations. It was a flood of panicked texts and emails from his chief communications officer, Marcus Thorne. "Urgent. Call me now. We have a 5-alarm fire. Clara. The board is asking for a statement." What the hell is going on? Richard, annoyed, opened the first link Marcus sent him. It was to Clara's blog post. He read the title, and the blood drained from his face. He read the first paragraph, then the second. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the cabin floor. His executives fell silent, watching him. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was contorted with a mixture of disbelief and pure, undiluted rage. She wouldn't dare. But she had. By the time his jet touched down at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, Nexus Dynamics stock was already in freefall in after-hours trading. The story wasn't just about a messy divorce anymore. It was about the character and integrity of its CEO. A man who sold a product based on domestic trust was now being publicly accused of domestic tyranny. The irony was not lost on Wall Street. Marcus Thorne was waiting for him on the tarmac, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "We have to get ahead of this, Richard," he said, skipping any pleasantries. "We need a statement. We need to frame her as unstable, grieving the fact she can't have kids lashing out. She's not unstable, she's a viper." Richard seethed, storming towards his waiting car. "I give her everything, a perfect life, and this is how she repays me." "The world doesn't see it that way right now," Marcus shot back, his voice strained with panic. "Right now, they see a billionaire who cut off his wife's credit card while she was at a fertility clinic. It's a PR nightmare of epic proportions. We have to discredit her now." They crafted a statement that evening, one that would go down in the annals of public relations disasters. It was released exclusively to a friendly journalist at a major business publication. While this is a deeply painful and private family matter, the statement read, "Mr. Worthington is saddened by his wife's latest public outburst. He has always and will continue to support Clara through her emotional and physical challenges. It is his hope that she will seek the help she so clearly needs, and that their privacy will be respected during this difficult time." It was classic gaslighting, and the public saw right through it. The phrase "her emotional and physical challenges" was interpreted as a callous reference to their infertility struggles, a move that backfired spectacularly. Commentators and the public alike labeled it as victim blaming of the highest order. A prominent female senator from California tweeted, "The statement from Richard Worthington's team is a masterclass in how not to respond to allegations of abuse. It's condescending, dismissive, and frankly disgusting. I stand with Clara." The fallout was swift and brutal. The board of Nexus Dynamics, a collection of powerful figures who cared more about shareholder value than their CEO's marital problems, called an emergency meeting. A major pension fund, which held a massive stake in the company, issued a public statement expressing deep concern over the leadership and governance at Nexus. A group of female engineers at Nexus Dynamics anonymously leaked an internal letter to the press detailing a corporate culture that sidelined women, making Clara's story feel like a reflection of a systemic problem. Back in the penthouse, Clara watched it all unfold. She hadn't left. She was staying in the belly of the beast. It was her home, bought with the profits of a company built while she had sacrificed her own life. She wasn't going to be forced out. Isabella was her gatekeeper, fielding the hundreds of emails and calls pouring in. Gloria Allred's office had called. So had the producers of Good Morning America, The Today Show, and 60 Minutes. Clara wasn't ready for that. Not yet. For now, she was watching the man who had tried to silence her be deafened by the roar of a world that was finally listening. He had controlled every aspect of her life for a decade. But in one night, she had seized control of the one thing he valued most, his story. He had made her feel small, invisible, and powerless. But standing there, looking at the news alerts lighting up her phone, Clara Becker Worthington had never felt bigger or more powerful in her entire life. The firestorm was raging, and she was the one who had struck the match. The 24 hours after Richard's disastrous PR statement were a blur of strategy and caffeine. The penthouse, once a symbol of her confinement, had become Clara's fortress. She and Isabella had barely slept, fueled by a potent cocktail of righteous fury, black coffee, and the endless stream of supportive messages that continued to pour in from around the globe. Clara had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a cold, clear-eyed resolve forged in the crucible of public humiliation. She was no longer just the woman who had been wronged. She was the architect of a rebellion. Isabella, in her element, had transformed the minimalist living room into a command center. Her laptop was open to a secure video conference with two of her firm's most ruthless litigators. Stacks of documents were beginning to appear on the marble coffee table. They were methodically planning the legal assault that would accompany the public one. "He's going to come here," Clara said, her voice steady. She stood by the window, watching the morning light glint off the buildings below. She had showered and dressed, not in one of the couture outfits Richard had chosen for her, but in a simple pair of black trousers and a cream-colored silk blouse. It was her own armor. He won't be able to resist a direct confrontation. He needs to re-establish control. "Let him come," Isabella said, a shark's smile playing on her lips. She ended her video call, We're ready for him. The petition for divorce is drafted. We're filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences with a supplementary petition citing extreme cruelty and a pattern of coercive control. And I have a process server on standby 5 minutes from here. Will it be enough? Clara asked, turning from the window. He has an army of lawyers. An army that's busy dealing with the SEC inquiries that are about to pop up thanks to that stock dive, Isabella countered. We're not fighting him on his terms. We're not just arguing about money. We're arguing about conduct. His conduct. It's a different game, and he doesn't know the rules yet. The chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse shortly after noon. It was a sound that used to make Clara's stomach clench with anxiety. Today she felt nothing but a grim sense of readiness. The elevator doors opened, and Richard stormed in. He looked like a thundercloud in a bespoke suit. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped near his temple. His usually perfect hair was slightly askew, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. He wasn't alone. His communications chief, Marcus Thorne, scurried in behind him looking terrified. Richard's cold blue eyes scanned the room and landed on Clara. The sheer force of his rage was a palpable thing. "What have you done?" He snarled, his voice a low growl. He took a step toward her, but stopped when Isabella moved to stand directly at Clara's side. "Don't you dare take another step, Richard," Isabella said, her voice calm and lethally sharp. "This is between my wife and me." He spat, his glare fixed on Clara. "Get out of my home, Isabella. It's her home too, Richard, and I'm her legal counsel." "I'm not going anywhere," Isabella replied smoothly. "Anything you say can and will be documented." Richard ignored her, his eyes boring into Clara's. He tried the tactic that had always worked before utter dismissive contempt. "Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused to the company? To our life? For what? Because of some petty tantrum over a credit card. You've destroyed everything, you hysterical, ungrateful woman." The old Clara would have flinched. She would have crumpled. The new Clara stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I didn't destroy anything." "Richard," she said, her voice devoid of the emotion he expected. "I just described what you had already broken. Your company's stock isn't down because of my blog post. It's down because the world saw the man behind the curtain, and they didn't like what they saw. It turns out that a man who bullies his wife isn't someone people trust to run a multi-billion-dollar company." The directness of her response seemed to momentarily stun him. He had expected tears, apologies, fear. He was met with cold, hard logic. "This is absurd," he stammered, turning to Marcus as if for support, but Marcus was staring at his shoes. "I gave you a perfect life. You gave me a cage," Clara shot back, taking a step forward herself. "A beautiful, expensive cage, but a cage nonetheless. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a living ornament for your perfect life. You wanted an incubator for your perfect heir. You monitored my spending. You isolated me from my friends. You dismissed my feelings, and then you tried to publicly humiliate me to teach me a lesson. The lesson is over, Richard. Class is dismissed." Richard's face contorted with fury. "You will regret this for the rest of your life. Our prenup is ironclad. You signed it. You'll walk away with nothing. I will make sure of it. I'll drag your name through the mud until no one in this city will even look at you." This was the moment Isabella had been waiting for. She held up a hand. "About that prenup, Richard. We should talk." She gestured to the sofa. "Please have a seat." Richard looked as if he'd rather swallow glass. But something in Isabella's tone, a confidence that bordered on predatory, made him hesitate, and then reluctantly, he sat. Marcus hovered nervously behind him. Your prenup has a standard severability clause and a duress clause. Isabella began picking up a document from the table. But my firm believes we can make a compelling case that the entire agreement is voidable. You see, a contract requires a meeting of the minds and good faith from both parties. We will argue that your decade-long pattern of coercive control, culminating in the public act of financial abuse, constitutes a fundamental breach of the marital contract and indicates the prenuptial agreement was signed under fraudulent inducement, that you never intended a partnership, only a controlled acquisition of a spouse. Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. No judge will ever buy that. Won't they? Isabella countered. Public opinion is a powerful thing, Richard, and right now it's not on your side. We have Dr. Hansen's testimony about Clara's chronic stress levels. We have itemized records of you tracking her every purchase. We have dozens of women from your own company who are ready to testify about the toxic, misogynistic culture you fostered. This isn't just a divorce case anymore. It's a referendum on you. We'll subject your entire life, every email, every text, every financial transaction to discovery. Are you sure you want that? The color was draining from Richard's face. He was a man who lived in the shadows of corporate loopholes and NDAs. The idea of total public exposure was his worst nightmare. Just as he was about to retort, Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. A flicker of genuine surprise, followed by a slow, triumphant smile. "Excuse me for one moment," she said. She answered the phone, turning away slightly. "Daniel, what a pleasure to hear from you." Yes, I can see how that would be relevant. That's fascinating. In a series of offshore accounts, you say, to avoid. Yes, of course. I would very much like to see that documentation. My email is... Thank you, Daniel. I'll be in touch. She hung up and turned back to Richard. The air in the room had shifted. Clara could feel it. Richard felt it too. He looked wary, like an animal that has just scented a new unknown predator. "Who was that?" he demanded. "Just an old friend," Isabella said casually. "Daniel Petrov. You remember him, don't you, your former CFO? The one you fired 5 years ago, when he started asking too many questions about your executive bonus structures. He seems to think you've been systematically hiding marital assets in a series of shell corporations based in the Cayman Islands. Assets that you failed to disclose during the signing of your ironclad prenup. That Richard isn't just grounds for voiding a contract. That's fraud. And I believe the SEC and the IRS will be very, very interested in Daniel's documentation. It was a kill shot. The final devastating blow." Richard Worthington, the master architect, had been completely outmaneuvered. His face was a mask of pure shock, followed by the dawning horror of total ruin. He had been so focused on Clara, on the domestic battle, that he had forgotten about the corporate skeletons in his closet. He stared at Clara, a new, desperate look in his eyes. The rage was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading panic. "Clara, we can fix this. You and I. We can... I'll give you whatever you want. A new card. A separate allowance. Just call this off. Retract the story. Tell them you were distraught. It was the plea of a defeated man. Not a plea for forgiveness, but a plea for survival." He wasn't seeing her his wife. He was seeing the woman who held the power to destroy him utterly. Clara looked at him, at the shell of the titan who had dominated her life for a decade, and felt not pity, but a profound sense of release. "No, Richard," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "There's nothing to fix. This was never about the money." She glanced at Isabella, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. As if on cue, there was a polite knock on the penthouse door. Isabella walked over and opened it to reveal a nondescript man in a suit holding a legal envelope. "Richard Worthington?" the man asked politely. Richard just stared, mute. "He is Isabella, confirmed." The man stepped forward and held out the envelope. "You've been served." He placed the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of Richard, turned and left. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing the silence in the room. The divorce papers sat there, a white flag of surrender on a battlefield Clara had just conquered. Richard didn't even look at them. He just stared at Clara, his empire crumbling around him in the silent, fig-scented air. Later that evening, after Richard and a shell-shocked Marcus Thorne had departed, Isabella's phone rang again. It was a producer from Anderson Cooper 360. "They want you, Clara," Isabella said, covering the mouthpiece. "Prime time, no questions off limits. This is it. This is your chance to tell the whole world in your own voice." Clara looked out the window at the city, no longer a tapestry, but a real place full of real people, real struggles, and real hope. The blog post was the first shot. The confrontation was winning the battle. This interview would be winning the war. "Tell them yes," Clara said a formula. In her eyes that no one could ever extinguish again. "I'm ready." In the end, Clara's story did more than just break the internet. It broke the silence. It became a cultural touchstone, a reference point for a conversation that society was desperate to have about the hidden nature of coercive control and emotional abuse. Her single blog post launched 1,000 others, empowering countless individuals to speak their own truths. Richard Worthington was forced to step down as CEO, his carefully constructed legacy shattered by the one person he thought he had under complete control. Clara, with the support of a world she never knew she had fought for, and won a divorce settlement that was not just about money, but about justice. She used a portion of it to create the Gilded Frame Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic financial abuse reclaim their independence. Her story wasn't just a fleeting viral moment. It became a movement.
Poor wife walks in on millionaire proposing to mistress. What she does next will shock you. When Maria Delgado pushed open the ornate doors to the private dining room, she was expecting a quiet evening with her millionaire husband, Jacob. Instead, she found him kneeling before another woman, an extravagant ring poised between his trembling fingers. In that split second, her world shattered like delicate porcelain dropped from a great height. Emotions warred inside her: shock, betrayal, fury. But what Maria did next defied every expectation. The consequences of that decisive moment would reverberate through high society circles, revealing secret alliances, shattered trust, and a woman's quest to carve her own destiny out of the chaos her husband had unleashed. Maria Delgado had been raised to believe in the power of love. Born in a modest suburb of Philadelphia, she'd spent her childhood studying hard, watching her parents work long hours, and learning the value of perseverance. Love, in her eyes, was meant to be honorable, a sacred promise that transcended time and adversity. So, when she married Jacob Delgado, an unassuming man at the time, who later skyrocketed to wealth, she believed their union was fated. Everything about Jacob back then spoke of ambition tempered by warmth, a thirst for success supported by a deep devotion to her. They married in their mid-20s, beginning with a modest apartment in downtown Philadelphia. While he climbed the rungs of the real estate development world, Maria supported them both by teaching music lessons to neighborhood kids. She beamed with pride each time Jacob closed a deal that brought them a step closer to his dream, building an empire. Through the nascent years of their marriage, every victory was shared. Every setback was consoled by the other. The couple felt invincible. As Jacob's fortunes grew, so did his interests, and the city seemed too small for his evolving ambitions. With the promise of even greater success, he uprooted them to New York. Over time, he transformed from the modest man Maria once knew into someone revered by the upper echelons of Manhattan's elite. He became known for orchestrating multi-million-dollar real estate ventures. Their modest apartment turned into a lavish penthouse overlooking Central Park. From dressing in simple button-down shirts to adorning himself in bespoke suits from Savile Row, Jacob thrived in the glitz and glamour of high society life. Maria was proud of him, of course. But with each acquisition, each expansion, each lavish party thrown by Manhattan's wealthy set, she began to sense something intangible slipping away. The sweet, humble spark in Jacob's eyes was being replaced by a relentless desire for more. Their shared dinners became fewer and fewer. Their conversations, once intimately about dreams and daily life, revolved around boardroom strategies and the constant hum of new deals. Where there was once closeness, an unspoken chasm was opening. Still, Maria was no stranger to sacrifice. She believed that a marriage demanded effort and understanding. She accepted that his time was consumed by meetings, power lunches with foreign investors, and charity galas where he networked. She made space for his blossoming empire and refused to let suspicion take root. If he was distant, she told herself, it was because he was tired. If his phone rang at odd hours, it was because that was how the real estate world worked. She clung to the memory of that earnest young man who held her hand in their first tiny kitchen, dreaming of a brighter future together. But all illusions can shatter. Late one evening, after one of his countless events, Jacob casually mentioned that he wanted to take her to an exclusive restaurant the next night. Belafonte's, perched high above the city with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the sparkling skyline. Maria's heart fluttered. A private dinner just for them, exactly what they needed to revive their bond. She felt a spark of hope that maybe their relationship could rekindle, that the old Jacob would re-emerge, if only for a night. The following day, she dressed with care in a flowing, emerald green gown. She recalled how green was Jacob's favorite color on her, how he'd often say her eyes looked like precious jewels when she wore it. She left their penthouse with trembling excitement, not wanting to arrive too early, but also conscious that the invitation had felt momentous, like something significant was in store. When she reached the restaurant, an attentive maitre greeted her by name and led her down a corridor to a discreet, gold-trimmed door. Soft piano music flowed from within. Her heart pounded, imagining a candlelit room just for the two of them. Instead, as the door swung open, she stumbled upon a scene she could never have prepared for. Jacob, down on one knee, proposing to a statuesque blonde woman, his mistress, whose face Maria recognized from hushed rumors at parties and unconfirmed gossip in tabloids. The ring in Jacob's hand sparkled like a fallen star, captured by the overhead chandelier's light. Time froze, capturing her shock, the mistress's gasp, and Jacob's horrified expression in an excruciating tableau. Maria felt dizzy, her sense of reality splintering. Memories of their simple days in Philadelphia flooded her mind. Her hands shook as she clutched the handle of the door for support. She sensed the maitre d' quickly slip away, likely to avoid the pending explosion. The look on Jacob's face rapidly morphed from romantic fervor to utter panic. How long has this been going on? Maria finally managed to choke out, voice trembling. The blonde woman, Annalise Winslow, as Maria would later learn, stepped back, her hand protectively covering the ring that Jacob had tried to slip on her finger. She had a deer-in-headlights look, as if she had expected this moment, but not in such a brutal collision of truths. "Maria," Jacob began, rising slowly from his knee, "it's not what it looks like." A pit of molten anger rose in Maria's chest. The anguish burned, pried open by betrayal. She glanced at the ring Jacob was holding. It wasn't a tiny diamond. It was a massive rock, overshadowing the modest ring she herself had worn with pride for years. Everything about this was a sickening confirmation of what she had refused to suspect. She refused to let him see her crumble, her eyes brimming with unshed tears locked onto Jacob's. "For once in your life," she said, voice trembling yet steel-edged, "tell me the truth." Jacob glanced between Maria and Annalise. Shame flickered across his expression, but only for a moment before resolve set in. In a voice that cracked, he said, "I was going to explain it after this. I never wanted you to find out this way." He was trying to speak gently, but Maria found it galling. Here, in a lavish, private dining room that cost more per meal than some people earned in a month, her husband was kneeling before another woman with an engagement ring. Her world felt false, illusions shattered like shards of broken glass. But instead of running, instead of screaming or hurling every insult she could muster, Maria inhaled. She decided then and there that she wouldn't collapse. Not now, not ever. With a composure that surprised even herself, she said, "Fine." She tugged off her wedding band, the simple gold band that had once symbolized their hopeful union. She placed it gently on the nearest table, right next to a silver platter meant for some extravagant dinner. She looked at Annalise, whose cheeks had gone pale. "Congratulations," Maria said icily. "You've caught a big fish. I hope you both choke on it." She turned on her heel, ignoring Jacob's pleas for her to wait. She walked out with her head held high, tears threatening to fall, but refusing to let them out until she was out of that stifling, perfumed environment. Little did either of them know, Maria's next actions would set off a chain reaction of hidden truths, corporate betrayals, and unexpected alliances that would ultimately turn the power dynamics of their world on its head. Maria spent the night at a friend's townhouse near Gramercy Park. This friend, Jennifer Robertson, was one of the few people Maria trusted implicitly. Jennifer, a lawyer by profession, had seen far too many wealthy husbands try to con their wives out of rightful settlements. In the warmly lit living room, Maria recounted the horrifying scene. Jennifer listened quietly, her arms folded, eyes flashing indignation at Jacob's betrayal. When Maria finally finished, the tears she had held back since the restaurant began to slide down her cheeks. Jennifer promptly pulled her into a hug. "Maria," she murmured, "this is terrible, but you're not going through it alone. This time, you have to look out for yourself." Maria sniffled, still reeling. "I never thought. All those business trips, all those late nights." Jennifer tightened her grip. "People like Jacob, they think they can have everything. The wife, the mistress, the image of perfection. You don't deserve that." Maria wiped her tears. A cold anger took root in her heart, overshadowing her sorrow. She had sacrificed too much, believed in Jacob too long. Perhaps she'd been naive, but there was no time left for self-pity. "What do I do?" she asked, gazing at Jennifer. "I'm not going to just let him throw me away." Jennifer pursed her lips, then reached for her phone. "First, we need to call Patrick Hodges, one of the top divorce attorneys in New York. He'll know exactly what to do. The Delgado empire might have been built by Jacob, but you've stood beside him every step of the way. New York law won't ignore that." For hours into the night, they planned. Jennifer explained the complexities of high-asset divorces, the myriad ways spouses try to hide money. They dissected the financial empire Jacob had built, the real estate ventures, the offshore accounts rumored by some to exist, the charity foundations that he might use as tax shelters. Maria listened, took notes, and found her heartbreak morphing into a dogged determination. If Jacob thought he could so brazenly propose to another woman, he was in for a rude awakening. The next morning, Maria woke from a fitful sleep. She rose, showered, and dressed in a simple black outfit. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes rimmed with sadness, yet also lit by an undercurrent of resolve. She thought about that shocking moment in the restaurant. It had been mere hours since her life was turned inside out, yet it felt like an eternity. An unexpected wave of curiosity washed over her. What kind of woman was Annalise Winslow, beyond the honey-blonde hair and designer gown? How long had Annalise waited in the wings for Jacob to propose? Maria's mind churned with possibilities. Was she manipulated by Jacob's power, or was she the manipulator? Determined to cut through the speculation, Maria decided she wanted facts. She dialed a private investigator's number, someone recommended by Jennifer. A man named Richard Pine, known in certain circles for his thorough, discreet approach. Maria remembered meeting him briefly at a philanthropic event. He'd been introduced to her as the best man to find what's hidden. If there was dirt to be dug up, Richard Pine could unearth it. Within an hour, Maria was sitting in a small, upscale coffee shop near Union Square. Face to face with Richard, he was a sturdy man in his mid-50s, with kind but calculating eyes. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Delgado?" he asked in a measured tone, sipping his espresso. Maria inhaled slowly. "I found my husband proposing to another woman last night," she said, voice unwavering. "I need to know everything about her background, her motivations, any skeletons in her closet." Richard set down his cup, making the slightest grimace. "I'm sorry to hear that. Cheating spouses are unfortunately too common in my line of work. But let's talk specifics. What do you already know about this woman?" "Her name is Annalise Winslow. I believe she's from Los Angeles originally. She's in her mid-20s, definitely younger than me or Jacob. Rumor has it she used to be a model, or maybe a socialite. I'm not entirely sure." Richard nodded, scribbling notes. "Understood. I'll compile everything I can find. Miss Winslow's finances, connections, travel history, job history, whatever might help. And I assume you also want me to keep an eye on Jacob's dealings?" He lifted an eyebrow knowingly. "Yes," Maria replied firmly. "I have a strong feeling there's more to this than just an affair. I want to know if he's been hiding money or if he's planning to move assets out of the country. Anything that can help me get some measure of justice when we go to court, or even before that." Richard nodded again. "I'll be in touch soon." Maria thanked him and left, feeling that with each step she was moving deeper into a labyrinth where she had to be the one calling the shots. She wasn't merely a scorned wife. She was becoming an orchestrator of her own destiny. By afternoon, Maria knew she could no longer avoid returning to the penthouse. She needed her clothes, her documents, her life. She braced herself for the confrontation that was inevitable. Summoning what courage she had, she took a taxi to the towering building that had once felt like a dream come true. Its gleaming marble lobby now felt foreign. She ascended in the private elevator, her heart pounding, stomach in knots. As she slid the keycard and the doors to the penthouse opened, she heard Jacob's voice carrying down the corridor. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. She recognized the female voice, Annalise. They seemed to be arguing. Maria took a moment to listen. Through the grand foyer, she could make out the two silhouettes in the living area. She heard Annalise's voice, tight with anger. "You said you'd handle this differently. Now everyone's talking about it like some scandal. How do you think this makes me look?" Jacob hissed back. "You think I planned for Maria to walk in? God, Annalise, I'm juggling a million things." The board at Delgado Holdings is going to be furious if this leaks to the press. This was supposed to be discreet. Maria felt a twinge of savage satisfaction hearing the cracks form in their alliance. With her shoulders set, she stepped forward, letting her heels clack on the polished floor. Jacob and Annalise whirled around, identical expressions of shock distorting their features. Maria. Jacob started, lifting a hand in an entreaty, but Maria's gaze was locked onto Annalise. Up close, the mistress was undeniably striking tall, poised with carefully styled waves of golden hair. Yet Maria noticed a flicker of insecurity behind that controlled exterior. Good, she thought. I'm not the only one rattled. I just came to get my things, Maria said plainly. Then I'll leave, and you two can celebrate your engagement in peace. Annalise's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes narrowed in faint challenge. Jacob stepped forward. Maria, wait. I think we should talk. She laughed mirthlessly. Talk? That's what you wanted to do? You were going to propose to her, Jacob. Don't pretend there's any middle ground here. And honestly, what do I have to say to you? Congratulations. Jacob's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Actually, it is, Maria snapped, her emotions flaring. You made a choice, a public choice no less. I can't undo that, and I won't be your doormat. Annalise crossed her arms, lips pressed together, as though restraining herself from retorting. Maria caught the fleeting glance she gave Jacob, some mixture of fear and entitlement. It dawned on Maria that Annalise may have feared losing the security Jacob's fortune promised. The scorned wife's presence in the penthouse complicated matters for the mistress, who presumably dreamed of living here in style. Just take whatever you need, Jacob said after a moment. We don't need to fight in front of her. Maria's chest constricted, memories of 1,000 shared moments in this home swirling in her mind. But she suppressed the pain and moved calmly to the master bedroom, which was filled with expensive furnishings and the faint scent of the cologne Jacob once gifted her. She methodically packed a suitcase with her clothes and personal items. Her fingertips lingered on a framed photo of them in front of their first store-bought Christmas tree back in their humble Philadelphia apartment. She set it aside, not wanting to carry something so laden with nostalgia. As she re-entered the living area, she caught a glimpse of Annalise's engagement ring glinting in the afternoon light. Rage flared again, but she forced composure, reminding herself that she had a plan. Once she had everything she needed, she paused at the door, turning back to them. Jacob, she said, I've asked Patrick Hodges to represent me. If you want to avoid a scorched earth divorce, I suggest you speak to your attorney. Annalise's eyes flared at the mention of divorce. Possibly it hammered home the reality that Maria wasn't just going to vanish quietly. Jacob's face fell. He tried to speak, but words failed him. In that charged silence, Maria left. She felt hollow, but also strangely empowered. The woman who had walked in on her husband's betrayal mere hours ago was no longer the same, and what awaited her next was a labyrinth of hidden truths. Over the next week, Manhattan buzzed with rumors. The Delgado name had become a fixture of high society galas and philanthropic events. Whispers circulated through penthouse brunches, exclusive clubs, and midnight parties. Jacob Delgado had not only cheated on Maria, but had proposed to his mistress. The gossip columns ate it up. Real estate mogul's secret engagement was the headline in at least one online publication. People debated whether Maria was blindsided or complicit, whether she'd stay or go, and what the mistress was like. In the meantime, Patrick Hodges, the formidable divorce attorney, laid out a roadmap for Maria. They met in his sleek midtown office, with Jennifer present as moral support. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the hustle and bustle of Manhattan below, as though showing a world that never slept, never paused for heartbreak. Maria, Patrick said in a calm, almost fatherly tone, Jacob's net worth is estimated at around $700 million. We need to act fast to ensure he doesn't move assets out of reach. 700 million, Maria echoed, stunned, though she knew the figure hovered in that range. She had watched his success balloon over the years, but to hear it stated so plainly shook her. She'd never placed a dollar value on their relationship. Patrick continued, "We'll file motions to freeze a significant portion of his assets until the court rules on equitable distribution. But be ready, his legal team will fight. Also, the prenuptial agreement. We need to see if that holds up in court." Maria's brow furrowed. "We had a prenup, but it was signed before his empire expanded like this. Back then, he had almost nothing. I never thought it would come to this." Patrick flipped through documents. "Yes, it's from 15 years ago, but we have grounds to challenge it if certain conditions have changed significantly, or if you can prove undue influence or anything along those lines. After all, you supported him morally and even financially in the early years." Jennifer chimed in, "Don't forget about the potential hidden offshore accounts. Rumors are swirling that he might be moving investments to the Cayman Islands." Maria felt her insides twist. Every layer of betrayal deepened her resolve. "Let's do whatever it takes. I don't want to be cruel. I just want what's fair. But if Jacob tries to shortchange me after all I've done to help him, then I'm ready to fight." Patrick gave a firm nod. "I'll coordinate with your investigator, Richard Pine. We'll uncover any hidden income streams or suspicious accounts. In the meantime, you need to remain calm. These next few weeks will be a roller coaster." Maria exhaled. She glanced at Jennifer, who squeezed her hand. This was war, and she was prepared. Late one night, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She tapped it open and saw, "I have information about Annalise. Meet me at Calderwood Cafe, 9 am tomorrow. R.P. Richard Pine." She felt a rush of anticipation. The next morning she arrived at the cozy Calderwood Cafe, known for its artisanal pastries and discreet atmosphere. Richard sat at a corner table, leafing through a manila folder. Maria slid into the chair opposite him. "So, what have you found?" Richard leaned forward, voice low. "Quite a bit, actually. Annalise Winslow is from Los Angeles. That much is true. She started off as a pageant contestant in her teens, then moved into small-time modeling gigs, mostly promotional events. After that, she tried to break into Hollywood. She had a few minor roles, nothing significant." Maria listened intently as Richard continued. "She married briefly at 19 to a man named Parker Bloom, an older talent manager. The marriage lasted less than a year, and she walked away with a sizable alimony settlement, allegations of emotional abuse from both sides, but nothing proven. After that, she moved to New York around 3 years ago. She's been living in high-end apartments, though it's unclear how she's been affording them." "So she's a gold digger," Maria muttered, disgust curling in her stomach. Richard shrugged. "She's adept at finding wealthy men, that much is clear. And from phone records I accessed, it seems she was seeing Jacob for at least a year before you caught them." Maria's chest clenched. A year. She felt her hands tremble momentarily. For a year, her husband had been living a double life. "Go on," she prompted, forcing composure. "Her finances are shaky. She maintains appearances, but she's leveraged with credit card debt, living off gifts from older boyfriends. I also found something else, some suspicion that she was previously connected to a money laundering scheme, though nothing concrete enough for an arrest. She's cunning. She knows how to navigate the wealthy circles and keep her secrets hidden." Maria's mind spun. She pictured Annalise draped on Jacob's arm, whispering sweet words to him while systematically securing her future with his money. This was no mere fling. This was a calculated move by an opportunist. It didn't absolve Jacob, he was equally to blame, a grown man who should have seen the red flags. but it changed how Maria viewed the dynamic. "How can I use this information?" she asked. Richard folded his hands. "Your legal team can introduce this as evidence that Annalise might be pushing Jacob to move assets, or that she might have a questionable background that affects the case. While it doesn't directly influence your divorce settlement, it can shed light on Jacob's credibility and motives." Maria nodded slowly. "Thank you, Richard. This is incredibly helpful." She closed the folder, feeling her spirits lift for a moment. This was more than just heartbreak. Now it was a mission to protect herself from two cunning players. She had let love blind her to Jacob's changes, but she would not let it blind her to her own future. While the divorce proceedings were set in motion, Jacob Delgado faced a crisis of his own. The Delgado Holdings Board of Directors had caught wind of the scandal. The reason? A major investor, KG Nakamura, who had planned to pour hundreds of millions into Delgado Holdings' new project, was now hesitant. The fiasco with Jacob's personal life signaled instability at the helm, and big money despises instability. A week later, in the elegant conference room at Delgado Holdings headquarters, Jacob was grilled by the board. The walls were lined with modern art, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. But the tension inside was palpable. Men and women in suits, representing some of the largest financial institutions, demanded answers. Board member Regina Charles, a tough-as-nails executive with silver-streaked hair, eyed Jacob coldly. "We're not here to judge your personal decisions," she began, "but your behavior is affecting our business." Mr. Nakamura is spooked. He stalled negotiations because he doesn't like the negative press associated with your, shall we say, public affair. Jacob attempted a confident posture. "We can handle this," he said. "Nakamura's concerns are about the stability of the company. I can assure you Delgado Holdings is stronger than ever." Regina's sharp gaze didn't waver. "Your wife, Maria Delgado, has been a visible figure at charitable events linked to this company. She was involved, albeit unofficially, in several philanthropic partnerships. Her departure in such a scandalous way raises questions. We need to ensure no crisis of confidence escalates." Jacob felt his insides tighten. The narrative was twisting. Maria was no longer just his wife. She was an extension of the brand he had built. He stifled the desire to lash out at the board's insinuation that his personal life was fair game. "Instead," he insisted, "I'm working on controlling the narrative. We'll handle the press. And as for Maria, once the divorce is settled, we can present a unified, amicable front." Regina's lips formed a thin line. "Jacob, we hired a PR team. They've strongly advised that we do damage control before the next shareholders' meeting. That might involve statements from both you and Maria, something to quell rumors of a messy divorce that could sabotage investor confidence. Besides, have you considered the ramifications if Miss Delgado takes you to the cleaners financially?" Jacob's frustration peaked. "I have attorneys for that," he snapped. "We'll handle it." The rest of the board members exchanged looks. One of them, Arnold Powell, tried to lighten the tone. "Look, we just need reassurance that Delgado Holdings won't implode from a personal scandal. If you can't get it under control, we might have to explore leadership changes." That was the ultimate threat, a coup at his own company. Jacob forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "There will be no need for that. Trust me." As the meeting adjourned, Jacob was left alone for a moment. His reflection in the glossy surface of the boardroom table looked older, more stressed. He thought of Maria's eyes the last time he saw her, brimming with betrayal. Then he thought of Annalise, upset with the negative attention. For the first time, he questioned if the precarious web he'd spun was worth the cost. But it was too late. The avalanche had already begun. In a twist that neither Maria nor Jacob could have predicted, help came from an unexpected quarter Jacob's estranged sister, Daniela Delgado. She had parted ways with the family years earlier, after disagreeing with Jacob on a major business decision that led to a bitter falling out. Since then, Daniela had built her own path, creating a successful interior design firm. She'd always admired Maria's kindness from afar and held contempt for Jacob's ruthless ambition. Out of the blue, Daniela reached out to Maria. She called one evening while Maria was reviewing documents with Jennifer. "Maria, this is Daniela, Jacob's sister." Maria's initial shock shifted into curiosity. "Yes, Daniela. The first remember you. We haven't spoken in ages." "Look," Daniela said, "I heard about what happened. I don't blame you if you don't want to talk. But I have information about a couple of major real estate deals. Jacob's been working on things that might be relevant to your divorce. If you're interested, meet me at the Silverwood Lounge tomorrow night at 8. Maria hesitated. Jacob had mentioned Daniela only rarely, and it was always laced with bitterness. Yet something told her Daniela might be sincere. "I'll be there," she said, surprising even herself. The next night, Maria walked into the Silverwood Lounge, a chic bar with velvet drapes and soft jazz music. Daniela, a petite woman with sharp features, waved from a corner booth. She wore a stylish black suit and maintained a guarded expression. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniela said, offering a polite nod as Maria sat down. Maria studied Jacob's sister. "I'm surprised you reached out. Jacob never said good things about you." Daniela smirked. "Likewise. He painted you as the obedient wife who turned a blind eye to his shadier deals. But I knew that wasn't you. We might not have been close, but I always saw your kindness." Now, about his real estate dealings. She opened her handbag and pulled out a USB drive. These are documents that point to a series of shell companies linked to Delgado Holdings. "I suspect he's been funneling money offshore. Years back, he tried to get me to help launder funds through interior design contracts. I refused, and that's partly why we fell out. He threatened me to keep quiet." Maria's eyes widened. She carefully took the USB drive. If these documents were legitimate, they could be a game changer. "Why help me now?" Daniela's eyes flickered with something akin to regret. "Because Jacob's arrogance has gone too far. He's forgotten family loyalty and moral boundaries. If he wants to destroy you, the one decent aspect of his life, I won't stand for it. And, to be transparent, I want him to face consequences for all the times he's bullied and blackmailed anyone who stood in his way." Maria tucked the USB drive into her purse. She studied Daniela carefully, trying to gauge sincerity. "Thank you," she said eventually. "I'll have my lawyer look at this. I appreciate your honesty." Daniela gave a single nod. "Just be careful. He'll retaliate if he feels cornered. Jacob Delgado is still my brother, and I know what he's capable of." Fear nudged at Maria's heart, but it was overshadowed by her determination. She swore to herself that she wouldn't let fear rule her anymore. Jacob had shattered her trust and flaunted his betrayal in a way that threatened her entire future. She wouldn't stand idly by. While Maria gathered information, Annalise Winslow was not idle. She realized Jacob was in a precarious position. The negative press, the board's dissatisfaction, and now the looming divorce threatened to erode the luxurious future she had counted on. In whispered phone calls, she pressed Jacob to finalize their engagement, to secure her name in the Delgado fortune before it slipped away. Yet Jacob delayed, promising to fix everything first. Uncertain of Jacob's ability to protect her interests, Annalise took matters into her own hands. She arranged a private lunch with one of Jacob's longtime associates, a banker named Charles Montclair. He was known to handle offshore transactions for Delgado Holdings. At a chic bistro on the Upper East Side, she met Charles in a secluded corner. "Jacob trusts you, right?" she asked, swirling her wineglass. She wore a designer dress, exuding confidence, even though her heart pounded with nerves. Charles nodded slowly. "We've done business together for years." Annalise leaned forward, letting her voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. "Good, because I want to guarantee that if things go south, I'm protected." Charles raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order." Jacob keeps his financial dealings close to the vest. A sly smile tugged at Annalise's lips. "I'm sure he does. But I also know Delgado Holdings is possibly moving money in ways that aren't entirely above board. If you help me get a piece of the pie quietly, I'll make it worth your while. I have connections in L.A. that might interest you." Charles swallowed. He was no stranger to morally dubious requests, but this was bolder than most. Still, money talked. "What do you propose?" "I propose you set me up with an offshore account. A small percentage of whatever Jacob moves. I don't care if it's 1 million or 10 million, as long as I have something to fall back on. In return, I'll keep my mouth shut if the authorities come knocking." Charles looked uneasy. He glanced around to ensure no one was listening. This could be risky. "But I'll see what I can do." Annalise nodded, leaning back with a smug satisfaction. She felt a thrill at the prospect of securing her own fortune. She was tired of waiting for Jacob to deliver. If he was going to let his empire crumble, she'd salvage what she could. The divorce proceedings accelerated. Under the scrutiny of Patrick Hodges, Jacob's lawyers tried every trick in the book. They argued that the prenuptial agreement limited Maria's entitlement to a fraction of the current fortune. But Patrick introduced evidence that Maria's early support had directly facilitated Jacob's meteoric rise. Financial experts testified about intangible contributions, spousal support, and the validity of a prenup signed under potentially misleading circumstances. Behind closed doors, settlement negotiations were intense. One afternoon, in a wood-paneled conference room in the courthouse, Maria and Jacob faced each other while their lawyers sparred over details. The tension was suffocating. Jacob's lead attorney, Garrett Rhodes, glared over his wire-rimmed glasses. "My client is offering a significant settlement, $20 million. That's more than generous, given the prenuptial agreement." Maria's lawyer, Patrick, shot back. $20 million is a pittance compared to the Delgado empire. "My client deserves equitable distribution, especially in light of the new evidence we'll be presenting about hidden assets." Garrett stiffened. "What evidence?" Patrick laid out the file containing Daniela's USB drive findings, shell companies, suspicious transfers, and potential tax evasion. Maria noticed Jacob's face flush with anger. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. "If you don't want the courts delving into these matters," Patrick said calmly, "it would be wise to offer a fair settlement and quickly." Garrett looked to Jacob, who cleared his throat. "This is ridiculous," Jacob muttered. "Maria, we can handle this privately. Let's not blow up everything we built." Maria's anger flared. "We didn't build anything together anymore, Jacob. You destroyed that. I just want what I'm legally entitled to, nothing less." Before Jacob could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, features hardening. "Excuse me," he said, rising and stepping outside. Maria exchanged a look with her lawyer, who gave her a reassuring nod. She felt a pang in her chest, remembering the man she once loved. But she'd come too far to yield. Moments later, Jacob returned, face grim. "There's a situation at Delgado Holdings. I need to attend to it. We'll resume this later." He left with Garrett, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. Patrick exhaled and turned to Maria. "He's rattled. That's good. But we need to keep the pressure on." She nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. Jacob had always thrived under pressure, but this was a new realm of stress, public scandal, bored dissatisfaction, a vengeful sister revealing his secrets, a cunning mistress. and a betrayed wife fighting back. If anyone understood the empire's vulnerability, it was Maria, and now she had no reason to protect it. Jacob discovered what the phone call was about. Keiji Nakamura had officially withdrawn his large investment due to the ongoing negative publicity and internal instability at Delgado Holdings. The blow was catastrophic. Stocks dipped, the board was livid, rumors of a hostile takeover circulated. Jacob's once iron grip on his empire was loosening. In the days that followed, tabloids feasted on fresh gossip. Leaked whispers suggested that Jacob's mistress was demanding a rush wedding and that the Delgado board was considering a forced resignation if the crisis continued. Jacob's face, once glowing with ambition, now appeared haggard. The carefully curated facade of success was crumbling faster than he could salvage it. At Annalise's insistence, Jacob tried to offer her a lavish ceremony in some exotic locale, hoping a quick marriage might quell some rumors and secure her unwavering support. But the board frowned at any attempt that would further sensationalize his personal life. An internal power struggle erupted, with some directors pressuring Jacob to step down temporarily. Regina Charles especially had sharpened her stance, aligning with a faction that believed Delgado Holdings needed a new figurehead to reassure investors. In a desperate bid to maintain control, Jacob made a public statement. Cameras flashed as he stepped before a cluster of reporters outside the Delgado Holdings headquarters. He wore a dark suit, face set in an expression of forced calm. "I would like to address recent speculations regarding my personal life," he began, voice subdued. "I am currently going through a divorce process, and I request privacy and respect during this challenging time. Delgado Holdings remains strong, and we are fully committed to our ongoing projects. The unfortunate withdrawal of Mr. Nakamura's investment does not diminish our stability." He continued with corporate platitudes, but the reporters clamored for more personal answers. "What about the mistress? Are you engaged already?" one asked. Jacob ignored it, reading from his carefully prepared statement. But the damage was done. In the public's eye, he was the faithless millionaire with something to hide. Watching the coverage from Jennifer's townhouse, Maria felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She had loved that man once. Now he was a stranger, fighting to keep illusions intact. But illusions always come at a price. She reminded herself of that truth. As the divorce hearing approached, tension reached a fever pitch. Patrick Hodges received a call from Garrett Rhodes, requesting a private meeting, just the lawyers and their clients, with no media or court officials. Maria and Jennifer drove to the law firm's office, hearts pounding. They were ushered into a sleek conference room. Jacob, Garrett, Patrick, and a stone-faced Annalise were already seated around a polished table. Maria ignored the pang of seeing Annalise by Jacob's side. She focused on the fact that the mistress's presence was highly unusual in a divorce negotiation. Garrett cleared his throat. "We've come with a proposition, Mr. Delgado is prepared to offer a settlement of $100 million plus the Manhattan penthouse in exchange for Miss Delgado signing a non-disclosure agreement, no further revelations about Delgado Holdings or Mr. Delgado's personal affairs. We want to handle this quietly and move on." Maria's eyes flickered. $100 million was vastly larger than the initial offer. She glanced at Patrick, who gave a subtle nod, indicating it was a substantial proposition. Yet something felt off. Her gaze slid to Annalise, who looked uncharacteristically tense. Patrick spoke up. "It's a generous offer, but we need to verify if there are no further conditions. Also, the NDA's scope must be clarified. Miss Delgado has the right to discuss her personal experiences freely." Jacob cut in, voice sharp. "I don't want my ex-wife airing dirty laundry. We sign this. We end it. Maria, you go your way, I go mine." Maria's heart raced. $100 million could secure her future, free her from the stress, and let her start anew. It was a fortune beyond her wildest imagination back when they were newlyweds sharing cheap takeout. But then her gaze settled on Annalise, who avoided eye contact. Maria recalled the shady deals and the knowledge that Delgado Holdings was unraveling behind the scenes. She realized that if she accepted the offer blindly, she might be stepping into a trap, allowing Jacob to cover up potential crimes and injustice. She licked her lips, choosing her words carefully. "Jacob, I appreciate the offer, but I won't sign anything until I'm sure you're not hiding more. I don't need your hush money if it means letting you and Annalise ruin more lives." Anger flashed in Jacob's eyes. "You're letting bitterness cloud your judgment. Think of what 100 million can do for you." Annalise finally spoke, voice hesitant. "Maria, please. There's no need to drag this out. We can all walk away with dignity." Maria almost laughed at the irony of Annalise talking about dignity. Instead, she closed her eyes, remembering the heartbreak of that night at Belafonte's. Then she thought of the fear and manipulation that might still lurk if she let Jacob walk away scot-free. "I'll consider it," she said, "but I'm not making a decision today." Garrett, Jacob's lawyer, looked frustrated. "We need an answer soon. Otherwise, we proceed to court." "Then we proceed to court," Patrick replied calmly. "We'll see you there." The tension was palpable as they stood to leave. Jacob locked eyes with Maria. "Don't do this," he said softly, an echo of the old Jacob appearing for a split second. "We can solve this quietly." She met his gaze, seeing the man she once loved drowned out by layers of betrayal. "If you had wanted things quiet, you wouldn't have proposed to your mistress in a public place." The day of the official court hearing dawned cloudy and brisk. Photographers and reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Maria arrived with Patrick, Jennifer, and a small security detail. Whispers followed her. She was no longer just a betrayed wife, she was the woman who might topple a millionaire's empire. Rumors swirled that she possessed damning evidence of fraud. Jacob and Annalise arrived separately, escorted by their own legal team. People craned their necks to catch a glimpse, cameras clicking furiously. He looked tense, shoulders stiff under his tailored suit. Annalise kept her chin high, though she lingered behind Jacob, as if wary of the scrutiny. Inside the large, wood-panelled courtroom, the judge, a stern woman named Honorable Denise Faraday, called the session to order. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. On the surface, it was a high-profile divorce, but in reality, it was a battleground for corporate secrets, personal vengeance, and heartbreak. Patrick presented Maria's case with meticulous detail, her contributions to Jacob's early success, the suspicious financial maneuvers uncovered by Daniela and Richard Pine, and the emotional distress caused by Jacob's public betrayal. Garrett rebutted by citing the prenup, painting Maria as vengeful, seeking more than she deserved. Midway through the proceedings, Patrick introduced a surprise witness, Daniela Delgado. She stepped forward, looking poised and determined. Her testimony about Jacob's shell companies, backed by email chains and financial documents, sent waves of shock through the courtroom. The tension climbed higher when she revealed that she had confronted Jacob years ago about money laundering allegations, which he had vehemently denied. When cross-examined by Garrett, Daniela stayed firm. "I have no reason to lie," she said quietly, "other than to expose wrongdoing. My brother has threatened me, but I won't be silent anymore." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jacob's face was a mask of barely contained fury. For Maria, hearing Daniela stand up for the truth was both validating and heartbreaking. This was the family she once thought she had. Then it was Annalise's turn on the stand. She was visibly nervous, glancing repeatedly at Jacob for reassurance. Under Patrick's probing questions, she admitted to the affair, to Jacob's promises of marriage, but denied any knowledge of financial misconduct. She played the part of the innocent lover, insisting she merely fell in love with a man who claimed he was divorcing his wife. Patrick pressed. Did Mr. Delgado ever mention, even indirectly, wanting to shift funds out of the country, presumably to protect them from the plaintiff? Annalise hesitated, swallowing hard. Not in so many words, she finally said. He mentioned wanting to make sure his money was secure. That small admission sent a ripple through the courtroom. Jacob's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. By the time Annalise stepped down, sweat dotted her brow. She cast a fleeting glance at Jacob, who looked away. After a tense lunch recess, the court reconvened. Garrett strode to the centre, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. Your Honour, we have newly obtained evidence regarding Miss Delgado's own financial history. Specifically, questionable transactions in her name that raise concerns about her credibility. A hush descended. Maria's heart skipped. She had no idea what they were referring to. She quickly glanced at Patrick, who looked equally puzzled. Jennifer furrowed her brow. Could Jacob's legal team have found something contrived to discredit Maria? Garrett projected documents onto a screen. They showed wire transfers from an account titled M. Delgado to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The amounts were substantial, several $1 million. Maria was dumbfounded. She had never seen those transactions. This is absurd, Patrick hissed. Miss Delgado has no knowledge of these accounts. They must be fabricated, but Garrett pressed on. Nevertheless, these documents indicate that Miss Delgado might have known about offshore practices and even participated in them. We must question her integrity and motivations. Maria's stomach churned. She realized this was a smear tactic, orchestrated to paint her as complicit or hypocritical. But how had they manufactured these records? The judge frowned, calling for order. Miss Delgado, she addressed Maria. Do you have any knowledge of these transactions? Maria stood, voice trembling but resolute. None whatsoever, Your Honour. This is the first I've seen of these so-called documents. I suspect they're part of a scheme by Mr. Delgado to undermine my case. Jacob's eyes flicked toward her. Was there a flicker of regret or just determination to win at any cost? The judge instructed further examination of the evidence, and recess was called for the day. The media outside went wild, speculating on whether Maria was truly innocent or had skeletons in her closet. That evening, as Maria regrouped with her team, she tried to steady her nerves. Jennifer cursed Jacob's low blow. Patrick immediately launched an investigation into the suspicious documents, suspecting they were forged or manipulated. Meanwhile, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard Pine. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 7 a.m. I might have found something that can flip this around. Tension thrummed within her. She realized that she was dancing on the edge of a high-stakes game, one where illusions could be crafted and destroyed in an instant. She also sensed that if she didn't play her cards right, she could lose everything. The next morning, Maria arrived at Richard Pine's unremarkable office building in Chelsea. In a modest but tidy workspace, he greeted her with a firm handshake. On his desk, he had a laptop open to a complicated spreadsheet of IP addresses and account details. I suspected those documents introduced in court were forged, he began without preamble. So I did a deep dive into the digital metadata of the wire transfers. Every time a wire transfer is done, there's an electronic fingerprint. Long story short, the documents we saw in court have anomalies that suggest they were fabricated. Maria felt a surge of relief but also anger at Jacob's treachery. So it's definitely fake, Richard nodded. Yes, and I have proof. The IP addresses associated with these transactions trace back to a shell company that's linked to Delgado Holdings. The digital watermark indicates the documents were created using a specific software license registered to that same shell company. In simpler terms, It was an inside job. Maria exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. She wanted to hug Richard, but she settled for gripping his arm. This is exactly what we need. With this, we can prove they tried to frame me. Richard offered a faint smile. Be careful. Jacob's cornered, and cornered people can be unpredictable. But yes, this should be enough to dismantle their smear campaign. Armed with this new evidence, Maria returned to the courthouse. Patrick introduced Richard Pine's findings, systematically debunking the false documents. The judge was furious at the apparent attempt to mislead the court. Garrett stammered that they'd obtained the documents from an anonymous source and had no knowledge of the forgery. Jacob looked livid, glancing at Annalise, who stared at the floor. The judge sternly reminded all parties that perjury and tampering with evidence carried severe consequences. In a decisive moment, she ordered a full forensic audit of Delgado Holdings' accounts. That spelled disaster for Jacob, who had spent years carefully disguising questionable dealings. It was the final straw that cracked his empire's shell wide open. When the courtroom resumed, Maria's legal team presented ironclad evidence that the so-called Cayman Islands bank statements in her name were forged. Metadata traced them back to a shell company tied to Delgado Holdings, proving Jacob's team had fabricated documents to discredit her. Furious at the deception, the judge ordered a comprehensive forensic audit of all Delgado Holdings accounts. Within days, the company's stock nosedived as investors panicked, and board members blamed Jacob for the ensuing scandal. Facing mounting pressure, they forced him to step down as CEO, leaving him humiliated and struggling to salvage his reputation. Simultaneously, Maria's divorce proceedings reached a turning point. Recognizing he was cornered by the damning audit and under threat of a potential criminal investigation, Jacob instructed his lawyer to extend a vastly improved settlement offer. Instead of the nominal amounts initially proposed, Maria now stood to receive $200 million, a portfolio of properties including the Manhattan penthouse, and an official acknowledgement of Jacob's wrongdoing. Crucially, the settlement would also include his public apology for using forged evidence against her. Desperate to minimize further legal liabilities and public shame, Jacob surrendered to every condition, though he seethed at the outcome. On the day the final documents were signed, Jacob approached Maria in the courthouse hallway, offering a halting apology that acknowledged his betrayal and, beneath that, his regret at how spectacularly he had destroyed their shared dreams. Maria accepted his words without malice, though the bond they'd once shared was irrevocably severed. Annalise Winslow did not appear. Rumors suggested she was already planning her exit, unwilling to remain at Jacob's side now that his empire was in shambles. With the divorce finalized, Maria stepped away from the chaos. Though she walked away with more money than she'd ever imagined, she remained grounded by the values her parents had instilled in her. Resolving to use her resources for good, she founded an organization to assist women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, separation, or financial struggles. Daniela, Jacob's sister, became a staunch supporter. Together, they furnished the charity's new office, forging a friendship born of mutual respect rather than shared loyalty to Jacob. Jacob's fall from grace served as a cautionary tale in Manhattan's elite circles, a parable of unchecked ambition leading to ruin. Free from his shadow, Maria embraced her next chapter on her own terms, moving into a modern penthouse across town, a space she chose herself. Not out of obligation, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Gazing at the skyline one late afternoon, she allowed the crisp air to fill her lungs, contemplating the journey that had challenged her faith in love and trust. Yet, In rising from the rubble, Maria discovered a powerful truth: broken dreams could serve as the foundation for a more genuine, self-determined future. In the end, she transformed a devastating betrayal into an unbreakable will, resolved to live fully and authentically. Her story an enduring testament to resilience and renewal. And there you have it, the twists and turns of Maria Delgado's remarkable journey from unsuspecting wife to triumphant phoenix. She discovered the power of self-reinvention in the face of heartbreak and high-stakes drama, proving that even the deepest betrayals can ignite a fierce determination to rise. Jacob Delgado's downfall and Annalise Winslow's vanishing act became cautionary tales whispered throughout Manhattan's elite circles, while Maria's name was etched into the city's lore as a resilient survivor who refused to back down. She built a new life that honored her past but never allowed it to define her future.